What's happening, guys and girls? Acrinator here, and welcome to another episode of Paradoxical Ramblings. Depending on how long you've been following the channel, you may remember a video I did last June about the Warcraft live-action movie. Aside from being a perfect example of why I write scripts for all my videos nowadays, I touched on another topic that I'd like to expand upon now, so let's dive straight into it. Despite my semi-coherent ramblings in the video just under a year ago, I did manage to put across something that I've always said for movies and shows that are based off of other story mediums. Why are there so many bad adaptations? Of course, this rings true for more stories than just video games. The Last Airbender comes to mind, but let's just stick to Warcraft for this one. Here you have one of the most beloved expanded universes in gaming history, something that literally made it into the original class for the Video Game Hall of Fame, and they botched it. Sort of. The movie wasn't quite as bad as some would lead you to believe, but my biggest gripe with it was that it wasn't the Warcraft I know and love. It felt more like a random C-list fantasy movie with above-average special effects that happened to be borrowing the names and places. I mean, what was the point of making a Warcraft movie if you aren't even going to tell the story right? It's all fine and dandy to take some liberties to make your job a bit easier while telling the story. Modeling Stormwind off the in-game model, for example, isn't that big of a deal, considering we've never seen nor heard of what the original Stormwind was like before it was destroyed during the First War. It really doesn't affect the story that much. Some of the other changes made, not so much. Making Orgrim Doomhammer part of the Frostwolf clan instead of the Blackrocks, Garona falling in love with Lothar instead of Medivh, and especially the prematurely floating Dalaran take away from what Warcraft is supposed to be. Dalaran is the least egregious of these examples, though it's my personal favorite to pick on, because it hasn't been that big of an impact quite yet. Given time, and it will backfire, however. If Blizzard somehow succeeds in bringing more live-action movies down the line, how are they going to make enemies such as Archimonde or Arthas siege the City of Mages? Dalaran isn't supposed to fly until Wrath of the Lich King in WoW's timeline, making it a much easier target while on the ground. If they're just floating around in the sky, there's no guarantee that the aforementioned antagonists would be able to get their hands on it. With the Magi safe from potential dangers in their moving Sky City, they'll become a much more viable solution to many of the problems faced in the real Warcraft universe. That's not how it's supposed to be. The Kirin Tor are supposed to be occupied with various problems during a third war especially, meaning that they can't just use magic to solve all of Azeroth's problems. Having so many mages at the ready would mean that the forces of good should have an immediate answer to anything that pops up. During the Third War, you have demons popping up all over the place, the Scourge running amok all over Lordaeron, Archimonde destroys the city, and Arthas even manages to kill Archmage Antonidas. What do you think would happen if someone as strong as the former ruler of Dalaran was still alive to fight throughout the war? My guess? The Legion would have been defeated much sooner, and the Lich King may have never come to power. There's no telling if Arthas would still be able to infiltrate the city to get a hold of Antonidas, or even if the mages would have been able to help Stratholme when it was first afflicted by the plague. If they had more time and a safe place to conduct research on the Legion's undead army, they may have been able to prevent the deaths of countless innocents, and possibly the turning of Prince Menethil. But that, of course, would come further down the road if the movie's universe ever gets that far. And that's not to say that they couldn't somehow change the story to accommodate their desire to show off their fancy schmancy CGI. That still leaves the problems of Garona and Doomhammer in the immediate timeline, though. I forget if it was in an interview of some sort, or if it was in a forum post somewhere, but I vaguely remember someone from Blizzard giving a half-assed response to why Doomhammer was now part of the Frostwolf clan in the movie's universe. Their reasoning went somewhere along the lines that it was very rare for Orcish clans to be friendly towards one another. That is true. This is a fact that's reinforced in the canon novel Rise of the Horde. It's pointed out early on that the Orcish clans mostly kept to themselves, and sometimes battled each other for resources. They gathered together at Oshugun once a year for a festival to honor their ancestors, where it was then commonplace to temporarily forget about any feuds for the sake of the honored dead. It's actually during one of these festivals that Durotan and Doomhammer first met. While the elders of the clans met around the campfire to tell stories to one another, the young slept in a large communal tent. Durotan and Doomhammer were both on the verge of being considered adults, and they teamed up to sneak out of their tent and listen in on what their superiors were saying. Of course, they were kids and the conversations were extremely boring to them, but they did get something out of their antics: friendship. The Frostwolf and Blackrock clans were both aware and didn't intervene in the young one's friendship because they saw no harm in it. That's what made this relationship so special to the lore. It wasn't all too common for orcs of different clans to become as close as Durotan and Doomhammer were, setting a whole new precedent for orcish culture. Making Orgrim part of the Frostwolves takes away from something special and replaces it with a character that hardly deserves to carry the fabled hammer. Not only did the movie's Doomhammer not take part in a great cross-clan friendship, but he was a shitty friend altogether. He didn't even stand up for his own clan, the Frostwolves, when Gul'dan was gunning for them. He betrayed his people and doomed them all. After 2 horrid renditions, I'm sure the real Doomhammer is rolling in his grave. And that leaves us with Garona, the half-orc who's supposed to fall in love with Medivh, but instead fell for Lothar? I'm not quite sure how this one even happened. I know that he captured her and all, but it's all kind of fuzzy as to why and how she developed feelings for the Lion of Azeroth. In the canon version, Garona acts as an ambassador to the Horde and works closely with Medivh to avoid any massive conflict from spreading. That eventually blossoms into quite the romance, from which the Guardian manages to sow the seeds for his downfall when Sargeras takes him over. Being as The Last Guardian is my personal favorite novel of all time, it was awful to see what Medivh had become. He was relegated to a supporting role, and a confusing one at that. I get that the humans didn't necessarily understand fel energy at that point, but the movie didn't even hint at the Burning Legion's existence. That's open for massive amounts of speculation, but for now we'll just resign to saying that Medivh's death was anticlimactic at best. There's just so much that the Warcraft movie did wrong, and with no rhyme or reason to be found. There certainly were nods here and there to the fanbase sprinkled throughout, but they were the sort of thing where you go, hey, I recognize that, not, oh my god, they did it, moments that you'd hope for. I find it commonplace in recent times for movies based on other mediums of storytelling to abandon the original work for which it hails. I've heard 100 times and understand all too well the argument that they want the movie to stand on its own. They don't want to alienate anyone who wasn't already a hardcore fan. So to appeal to a wider audience, they change things. Lots of things, until it's hardly what it was when they first started. I reject that notion. For stories successful enough to earn a movie adaptation, especially as one as monumental as Warcraft, they don't need to change anything. Warcraft is a universe that's captivated literally millions of gamers, published over 20 full-length novels, and who knows how many short stories and comics. It is a cultural phenomenon if there ever was one, and I can guarantee you that you had a whole lot more disgruntled faithfuls walking out of the theater than people saying, I should check out the game now. It's the equivalent of inventing the wheel and then deciding to transfer that from hand wagons to horse carriages, but then deciding you want the carriage one to be its own special thing. So instead of the spoked circle you created that is the best thing since sliced bread, you go with a new icosahedron shape. It may not be as good as the original layout, but at least it has artistic integrity, right? I think Blizzard and Universal Studios had the potential to create something truly special together, and instead made a movie that wasn't quite as horrible as the other video game adaptations to come out of the last few decades. As someone who adores anything from this franchise, I can say from the bottom of my heart, please don't make another live-action Warcraft movie. It just isn't Warcraft. I think this needs time to slowly seep out of people's minds before another attempt is given. Preferably the next time it will be animated, but it's kinda hard to mess the story up anymore, I hope. If they ever do give it another go, I would be rooting that they'd take notes from the likes of Harry Potter and the Marvel Universe films. Those are stories that stayed true to what they are when being adapted onto the big screen. In the case of the Marvel Universe, they may not have taken literally everything with them to the theater, but they absolutely paid homage to the originals at the very least. It's understandable that you can't copy and paste everything from something like Warcraft into a different format, but at least make sure you're not fucking up what's already been laid down. Seriously, we're not expecting you to make this into a live-action movie. We just want to see true renditions of the characters and settings we know and love. We didn't all buy tickets to see a movie named Warcraft for shits and giggles. We did it because it carried the name of something we all hold near and dear to our hearts. What the vast majority expected was something more reminiscent of what that implies. Judging from the user scores, this wasn't what we had in mind. It's actually quite surprising to see how far off track this project got, considering how many higher-ups in Blizzard were executive producers for the movie. Roll through the credits and see how many names you can recognize, because I noticed quite a few, including Chris Metzen. You'd think that Blizzard would be more confident in their product to stand against any major changes that would threaten the integrity of one of their biggest and most legendary IPs. And who's to say what really happened? Maybe it wasn't Universal putting pressure on them to change everything. Maybe it was Blizzard who wanted to start fresh. Well, whatever it was, it didn't work. Hopefully Blizzard has learned anything that went wrong in the creative process for the Warcraft movie, because I truly want to see them try again. Maybe not with Warcraft, at least not so soon, but possibly with Overwatch, especially with all the murmurs going about lately for a television show. That seems like something that could really work, as long as it's not live action. I think I've gone on for long enough, so I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope I did a better job of explaining my gripe against unfaithful adaptations. If you did enjoy this, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Links for my social media and whatnot are in the description below, and as for the comment question, what games would you like to see be brought to life, either in movie or television format? I think Diablo would be the one IP of Blizzard's that could actually work in live action, though if we're talking about other companies, I'd love to see Supergiant's Transistor on the big screen. Anyways, that's all the time I've got for today, so until next time, don't die.